Throughout human history, certain stories have served as powerful moral lessons, offering deep insights into the consequences of sin and destruction. One of the most well-known stories is that of Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities mentioned in the Bible. These cities were not just destroyed, they became symbols of God's severe punishment for sin. But what exactly led God to completely annihilate Sodom and Gomorrah? What were the specific sins that the inhabitants of these cities committed? This story holds significance not only for the faithful, but also as a profound lesson on ethics, religion, and humanity. Let's explore the reasons behind the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah by examining the 5 main sins and the lessons we can learn in our modern context. Comparison with Pompeii. Before we dive into the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, let's take a look at another story of a city's destruction. Pompeii. Pompeii was a city of the Roman Empire, destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The eruption buried the entire city under ash and lava, turning Pompeii into a city frozen in time and marking it as one of the most famous natural disasters in history. Pompeii, a symbol of natural disaster. Before its destruction, Pompeii was a prosperous and bustling city. Located near the southern coast of Italy, Pompeii was a commercial hub with a diverse population, including merchants, artists, and farmers. The city was known for its beautiful architecture, intricately decorated homes, and lively markets. However, this prosperity could not protect Pompeii from the forces of nature. On August 24, 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius suddenly erupted, spewing millions of tons of ash and lava into the sky. Within hours, the entire city was buried under a thick layer of volcanic material. Those who couldn't escape were suffocated or buried alive. Pompeii quickly became a ghost town, forgotten for centuries, until its rediscovery in the 18th century. The destruction of Pompeii is a powerful reminder of the uncontrollable forces of nature. No human sin caused the eruption of Vesuvius, and nothing could have prevented it. It serves as a reminder that no matter how powerful or advanced humans become, we are still vulnerable to the whims of nature. Sodom and Gomorrah, the consequence of human sin. In contrast, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just about a natural disaster, but a lesson on the consequences of human sin. Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed not by a random act of nature, but by God's judgment. For the faithful, this story serves as a reminder that prosperity and power cannot protect one from divine judgment if they live in sin. In the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah are described as wealthy cities but full of sin. The inhabitants not only lived in luxury, but also indulged in cruel, immoral behavior. Their sins harmed not just themselves but the entire community, prompting God to intervene. Wickedness and sin. Wickedness, as mentioned in the Bible, is a broad term encompassing various behaviors and attitudes that go against morality, goodness, and kindness. When discussing the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the first sin highlighted is the pervasive wickedness that had consumed these cities. Wickedness in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah. Wickedness in Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just a few isolated acts. It was a systemic issue, affecting every aspect of life. The people had lost all sense of moral discernment, leading them to commit heinous acts without remorse. Wickedness here can be understood as a complete moral decay, where values like honesty, kindness, and compassion were abandoned. When God heard the cries of the innocent victims oppressed by the inhabitants of these cities, he decided to investigate. This is mentioned in Genesis 18:22-21. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Forms of wickedness in modern society. In modern society, wickedness still exists in various forms. War crimes, organized crime, corruption, and financial fraud are all evidence that when wickedness is unchecked, it can lead to disastrous consequences for individuals and communities alike. For example, in armed conflicts, acts of brutality such as the killing of civilians, rape, and torture are often used by those in power to achieve their goals. These actions not only cause immense suffering, but also erode the fabric of society, making people numb to the pain of others. Corruption and abuse of power are another form of wickedness in today's world. When those in power use their positions to enrich themselves rather than serve the public, They undermine trust in political and legal systems. This leads to injustice and widens the gap between the rich and poor, causing division and discontent in society. Consequences of wickedness. Wickedness not only harms the victims but also damages those who commit these acts. When people abandon morality and follow their base instincts, they lose their self-respect and the ability to experience true happiness. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, the inhabitants' wickedness reached a point of no return, and their complete destruction was the inevitable result of their actions. Idolatry and idol worship. While the Bible does not explicitly mention idolatry in Sodom and Gomorrah, it can be inferred that the people there worshipped false gods and rejected the worship of the one true God. Idolatry is the act of worshiping objects or entities that are not God, such as idols, money, power, and fame. Idolatry in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Romans 1:25, the Apostle Paul wrote, "They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator." This is the precise definition of idolatry. Instead of worshiping the Creator, people turn to worship the things they themselves have made. In the context of Sodom and Gomorrah, idolatry can be understood as the people abandoning their reverence for God and turning to other forms of worship. This could include the worship of wealth, power, or even themselves. When people place their trust and value in things that lack true power or meaning, they become idol worshippers, leading to moral decline. Idolatry in modern society. In modern society, idolatry is evident in the worship of material wealth, power, and fame. Many people are willing to sacrifice everything, including ethics and humanity, to achieve these things, not realizing that they are worshiping false gods. A prime example is the worship of money in today's world. In many countries, success is measured by the amount of wealth a person has, and the wealthy are often seen as successful and respected. However, the worship of money can lead to unethical behaviors such as fraud, corruption, and exploitation of others. Those who are caught up in the pursuit of wealth often lose sight of what truly matters, such as family, friendship, and compassion. The worship of power is another common form of idolatry in modern society. Those in power often see themselves as gods and use their power to control and impose their will on others. This not only leads to injustice and oppression, but also causes moral decay in society. Consequences of idolatry. Idolatry is not just a religious mistake. It is a sign of a corrupted soul. When people turn away from God and worship meaningless things, they lose touch with moral and spiritual values. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, idolatry contributed to the complete moral collapse of society, ultimately leading to the city's destruction. Homosexuality. One of the most infamous sins associated with Sodom and Gomorrah is homosexuality. For centuries, many have believed that this was the primary reason God decided to destroy these cities. However, it's important to understand that homosexuality was just one of many sins that provoke God's wrath. Homosexuality in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah. According to the Bible, engaging in homosexual acts is considered sinful, but it's crucial to note that this was not the only or the gravest sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis 19:5-9, when the men of Sodom demanded that Lot bring out the angels so they could know them, this was not just a manifestation of homosexuality, but also an act of sexual violence, a clear indication of the moral decay and brutality of the city's inhabitants. In this context, the phrase "know them" in the Bible doesn't simply mean to be acquainted or familiar, but implies sexual intercourse. The men of Sodom weren't just seeking to satisfy their sexual desires. They were asserting power and control over others. This reveals the extent to which the inhabitants had become morally depraved. Homosexuality in modern society. In modern society, homosexuality is no longer viewed as sinful or immoral in many cultures and societies. However, debates and conflicts over the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals still exist in some religious and social contexts. It is important to respect individual freedom and not use the story of Sodom and Gomorrah to justify discrimination and oppression against the LGBTQ+ community. The shift in perspective on homosexuality is the result of years of human rights advocacy and social progress. In many countries, same-sex marriage is now legal, and the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals are protected by law. However, there are still places where homosexuality is considered a crime, and LGBTQ+ individuals face discrimination, violence, and even the death penalty. It is essential to emphasize that in modern society, everyone deserves respect and fair treatment regardless of their sexual orientation. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah should not be misused to justify prejudice and injustice against the LGBTQ+ community. Consequences of homophobia, discrimination, and violence against LGBTQ+ individuals cause immense suffering and harm, not only to those directly affected, but also weaken the broader society. When a group of people is excluded and oppressed, society loses diversity and the ability to fully develop. In the context of globalization and cultural exchange, accepting and respecting differences is essential for building a just and civilized society. Laziness. Laziness might not seem as grave a sin as murder or theft, but it is often the root of many other sins. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, wealth and prosperity led to laziness and a lack of motivation to live righteously. Laziness in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah, Ezekiel 16:49-50, describes Sodom as a city filled with pride, excess food, and a disregard for the poor. The prosperity of Sodom was not used to help others. Instead, it led to moral decay and indulgence. Laziness is not just about doing nothing, it's about lacking purpose and failing to contribute to the community. In Sodom, the inhabitants became so comfortable with their luxurious lifestyles that they gradually lost the drive to work. This laziness wasn't just physical inactivity, but also a form of indifference to the suffering and needs of others. When people lack motivation to contribute and work, they are more likely to engage in other wrongdoings like greed, selfishness, and cruelty. Laziness in modern society. In modern society, laziness is often seen in the consumption without production, living without a clear purpose, and indifference to social issues. Those who are wealthy and powerful, yet fail to use their resources to help others, are also guilty of this sin. A clear example is in developed societies, where material comfort has reached a high level, and many people find themselves without a clear purpose in life. They consume goods and services without thought, spending time on trivial entertainment rather than self-improvement or contributing to the community. This situation not only wastes resources, but also leads to moral and spiritual decline. Laziness can also be seen in indifference to social issues. Many choose not to engage in community or political activities because they believe it doesn't directly affect them. This indifference reduces society's ability to address major challenges like climate change, social injustice, and violence. Consequences of laziness. Laziness not only leads to personal degradation, but also weakens society as a whole. When people become passive and fail to contribute, society loses its drive to grow and solve problems. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, laziness led to pride and moral decay, ultimately resulting in the complete destruction of the cities. Pride in sin. Finally, one of the most terrifying sins of Sodom and Gomorrah was pride in sin. The inhabitants of these cities not only committed sins but also took pride in them, openly boasting and showing no remorse. Pride in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah. Isaiah chapter 3:8-9 speaks of the pride of the people of Jerusalem, comparing them to Sodom. Jerusalem staggers, Judah is falling. Their words and deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them! They have brought disaster upon themselves. Pride in sin is the hallmark of a soul that has been completely corrupted, where individuals lose the ability to distinguish right from wrong and feel no shame or guilt for their immoral actions. In Sodom and Gomorrah, the inhabitants not only sinned, but also openly celebrated and took pride in their wrongdoing. Pride in modern society. In modern society, this pride can be seen in the glorification of corrupt behavior, deceit, and injustice, without any sense of responsibility or desire to change. For example, in many countries, corrupt leaders and unscrupulous businessmen not only escape punishment, but are also celebrated and respected by some. This reflects not only the degradation of individuals, but also the complete moral decay of society. Another form of pride in sin is the flaunting of a lavish and unethical lifestyle. In many cases, the wealthy and powerful use their resources to indulge in lowly desires without feeling any shame. Instead, they boast about it, seeing it as a symbol of success. This pride can also be seen in the modern consumer culture, where owning luxurious goods and living extravagantly is considered a status symbol and a measure of success. Many spend their lives chasing material goals without regard for the consequences of their actions on society and the environment. Consequences of pride in sin. Pride in sin not only degrades individual morality, but also weakens the entire society. When pride becomes the norm, society loses its ability to self-reflect and correct wrongdoing. This leads to a complete moral collapse and eventually the downfall of social and ethical values. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, this pride brought the cities to the brink of destruction. Conclusion. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just an ancient tale from the Bible. It is a powerful warning about the consequences of sin and moral decay. The 5 major sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, wickedness, idolatry, homosexuality, laziness, and pride in sin, hold important lessons for us today. Lessons from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. In a world filled with challenges and temptations, we must be vigilant to avoid falling into the traps of sin. Wickedness, idolatry, and pride in sin harm not only individuals, but also weaken society as a whole. By learning from the mistakes of Sodom and Gomorrah, we can avoid tragic outcomes and build a better society. Connecting to modern society. In modern society, we can see signs of moral decline similar to what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. The worship of money and power, laziness, and pride in sin are all manifestations of moral decay that we need to recognize and fight against. One of the greatest challenges of modern society is maintaining ethical and spiritual values in a world increasingly driven by materialism and self-interest. We must remember, as the story of Sodom and Gomorrah shows, that no prosperity can save us from destruction if we abandon our core values. Final thoughts. The lessons from Sodom and Gomorrah are a reminder that no matter where we live or what era we are in, preserving our moral and human qualities is essential to avoid the destruction of not just individuals, but of society as a whole. Let's live with compassion, justice, and respect for one another, always remembering that our actions today will shape the future for ourselves and the community around us.